Hi everyone, thank you so much for joining us at the panel discussion on raising multilingual children. Before we start, I'd like to present our special guests. The panelists are Richard Simcoe. I think most of you already know him. He has studied more than 50 languages and he's the organizer of the Polyglot conference. But some of you might not be familiar with the way he's raising his daughter in Macedonia. But we will get back to it shortly. The second panelist is Tetsu Yang. Tetsu has a wonderful international family. He's one of the main organizers of the Langfest, a language festival in Canada. Martin Lelarge, a polyglot who was raised multilingual, is only, I believe, 17 or 18? 18. We as parents have our own ideas about how to raise children, but what do children actually think about it? Welcome on stage. Hello.
Hello.
Hi.
Hello, everybody.
Hi. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you
for having us.
Yeah, thank you. So, I would like to start with a question, and then any of you can answer. Do you have any advice for parents with different mother tongues or first languages on how to share their languages with their children? Anyone want to answer that? I believe not, Martin. I don't think you have children yet.
Well, I can give it a first stab if the other two are okay with that. We are a family of 6. I mean, the immediate family of 6. That's myself, my wife, and these guys. Okay, so I put the photo of the 4 kids there so that I don't forget. Okay. So I have Ronnie, Nika, Akila, and the latest is Nina, who is right here, who is just born on April 10th. So with us, keeping the languages alive in our family is really about one person, one language. It's how to create a environment where we are able to maintain habits. Each person just speaks their language to the kids. It's really as simple as that in concept. How we implement it, obviously, it's quite we go quite deep in the ways we implement this. We have 5 languages at home. So I speak Mandarin. My wife is Japanese, so she speaks Japanese, and we have an au pair from Mexico who speaks Spanish to them. We live in Quebec, so they have French and English. I mean, we're in Canada, but sometimes we have other inputs, TV, or we ask their skating coach to speak in English. English is one where we have different various inputs. So for anybody out there, I think who have an opportunity to do au pair with just the parents, fantastic. If not, if you have some means, bring in somebody from outside. That's also a fantastic way to do it. Otherwise, there are many different strategies. As I mentioned, TV, apps. The imagination is really the limit. That's where I am with that.
Thank you very much. And do they, apart from the newborn, of course, do they all speak? Mandarin, Japanese, and Spanish, or do they have any preference?
At the current time, no, because we don't focus on learning languages. We really focus on the context that requires them to use the languages. So they don't realize that they're learning languages. They just, if they want to play with the au pair, then they use Spanish. I mean, it's just natural. It's the only thing they know because they were born into it. They don't know otherwise. I mean, their big question is, why do others don't speak 5 languages? That's more of their question. So
does it happen that they try to speak to you in Japanese and not in Chinese?
No,
not even at the beginning.
No, only when they're starting, when they don't have the concept of language. But that quickly goes away by the time they're 2.5 or 3. Even my 3-year-old right here, it's ingrained in them that they speak with Mandarin with me. That's really the purpose of this strategy, where you stick with one language. Even though I speak the other languages, I never switch around, because I want this habit for it to develop, so that they feel weird to speak another language with me. So they can talk other languages, speak Japanese with mom for an hour. If I walk into the room, they turn around, it's Mandarin. There's just no hesitation. That's just how it is. It's a habit. They don't know otherwise.
And which language do they talk? Do they speak to each other?
That's a very good question. There's two answers. One is, it depends on who's there. If I'm playing with them, they speak Mandarin amongst each other. If it's an au pair, it'll be Spanish. But the real question is, what do they speak when they are alone? You catch them alone. It is very often Japanese, especially right now. They've been in Japan for quite a while. But I think that's the language of the heart. I mean, it's mommy's language. It's the one that they express their emotions the most, I think. But I do expect French to take over very soon, with schooling is in French, so that'll be their strongest academic language. So I don't know how it's going to pan out, but these two are the main ones, I think.
Thank you. It was very interesting. Now I have a question for Richard. So you have a daughter. How old is your daughter?
She's going to be 13 in a month's time, so she's getting quite old now, I guess. She's in serious schooling, and so a lot of other subjects come into play, like science and maths, history, and of course the education spectrum of when she was younger, where it was kind of play and learning the basics. Really, all of the subjects are deepening for her.
And do you see any special inclination towards languages, or does she have other interests?
Yeah, I would sort of echo what Tetsu said. So she speaks languages just because I could give her languages. So it wasn't any intention of mine to make a mini-me or a small little polyglot that would go out in the world and learn lots of languages. That was definitely not the intention. And I'm still waiting for her to see what she actually really enjoys. Until recently, she was very happy just with the 5 languages we have at home. We have a slightly different setup.
That's 5.
We have a slightly different setup to Tetsu, in that we don't have an au pair. There's just me and my wife, and we're based in the Balkans, so we do have a lot of languages spoken. So it's a multilingual part of Europe, and so she's used to hearing lots of different languages spoken around her. But my wife and I only use Macedonian as a home language between ourselves. So in contrast to what Tetsu was saying about his children not speaking Japanese or another language to him, my daughter spoke to me exclusively in Macedonian until she was around 3. She would use other languages from time to time when we were playing, but at home, when we were together as a family, she would talk to me in Macedonian. And I think that's because that was the language Mummy used with Daddy, so therefore she was emulating that, which was, I think, interesting. She could speak all 3. At that time, she had 3 languages, and we added 2 more later when she was 16 months old. So she was still very small. And she'd speak English, French, and Macedonian. And we were living in the UK for the first 3 years. So even though English was the bigger language outside the house, Macedonian was the dominant language of the family, which I thought was quite an interesting turn of events.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
Does she speak with your English accent?
So she code switches. So she speaks British English and American English.
Wow.
Because she studies in an American system. So she speaks both in British and American. But yeah, I mean, when we go back home, people can't really tell that she's not grown up in the UK. She was there for the first 3 years, so she heard a lot of British English. Some of her teachers here actually speak with a British accent as well, so that helps. And also she has contact with the family. She's obviously, she's a young teenager, nearly teenager. So she has contact with people with voice calls and things from the UK. In terms of her choosing languages, so far she's really into computer programming. She likes other activities, and I really encourage that. She plays the piano. But recently she was using Link a lot. and we've started using Link together. And she's been doing it for her normal languages that we use at home. But a few weeks ago, she decided she wanted to try Dutch. And so she started teaching herself Dutch on Link, which was obviously, I was very pleased. But I'm also, she said, is it okay if I do some Dutch? And I'm like, knock yourself out, go for it.
Yeah. So I guess you partially answered the question I wanted to ask you. What would you do differently if you noticed that your child does not enjoy speaking different languages?
So we've been blessed in the fact that she's not really questioned it, I think probably in the same way as Tetsu, because it was just a thing that happened. And also, when she was 3, we moved to the Balkans where multilingualism is more normal and more usual, more common. And in the UK, it's not kind of that set up because English is very dominant. A lot of countries where a dominant language exists, where it's on TV all the time, it's quite pervasive. And it means that often people will give up languages in a family. For us, fortunately, that wasn't the case, and languages have been seen by people outside the family unit as a positive thing, and they say nice things to her when they hear her speaking other languages. So she's always had good reinforcement, positive reinforcement. Now she has questioned. So through her life, she has sort of said, Dad, why are we speaking Spanish? And I just answer and say, it's a really cool thing for you to be able to do. You need to learn a language when you go to school. It's going to save you lots of time in the future. You'll have more time to play, and the other kids will have to sit and learn Spanish words. And and she was like, oh, clever, Daddy. And she carried on. We spoke. But I always said to her, if you don't feel confident speaking, you know I understand the other languages too, and it's fine. So the main languages that we spoke, we didn't call Macedonian English or French. We called them daddy's languages and mummy's languages, because if you call it Macedonian, you can reject Macedonian, you can reject English, you can reject French, because it doesn't belong to someone you love. But you can't reject your mum and your dad, and that's a really key thing, I think, for anybody looking to raise children multilingually. Saying, use the way, how does daddy say it? How does mummy say it? Instead of how do you say it in French? Because then you depersonify the language, and that's really crucial that you keep it something they can love and cherish.
Very interesting. Thank you very much. Now I would like to ask a question to Martin. Are you there?
Yes.
Martin, can you briefly tell us your story? What languages did you learn as a child? Was it your choice or your parents' choice?
Yeah, so I guess we should start with my mother. She's Hungarian. She started learning and teaching Esperanto very soon. And my father, he's French, and eventually he also started with Esperanto. And that's how my parents connected. But my father lived in the Netherlands, so that gave me this interesting place where I grew up with my French father, Hungarian mother, them speaking Esperanto together, and me learning Dutch through my environment. They first wanted to keep Esperanto as their own secret language that they could only speak with each other, but that stopped when I was 4 or 5, I think, because then I answered them in Esperanto, and it was like, oh, we can't use that anymore. And also English. I learned English in school or on the internet. It depends on how you see it. And like Tetsu and Richard said, it didn't feel that special. It just felt normal, and I was rather wondering why the other children didn't speak 5 languages. But then finally, I realized it could be fun to learn languages as well, personally. So I started with Japanese. That was my first ever language I learned on my own.
How long ago? So when did you start?
When I was 13, so 5 years ago, 2015.
Wow. Mm-hmm.
That's
How
when
is
I
it going?
I stopped in 2016.
Why?
Well, I had learned it for 1 year, and I was curious about other languages, so I went to Swedish and then to Finnish and then so on.
Do you have a favorite language?
I think Finnish would be my favorite language. It sounds very cool.
Nice. I wanted to ask you, so you said that it felt very natural, so you never had the impression that it was kind of imposition to learn many languages, correct?
Yeah, not really. I didn't have that feeling.
Okay.
It wasn't really learning. It was more like
Absorbing
input.
it. Yeah. Okay. Okay. And what do you know other children who had a different experience? So the other kids who had a different experience, or do you think that being raised multilingual is just a super nice thing? What do you think?
I'm not sure. I don't know that many other multilingual kids actually. Most of the multilingual kids I know is speak English and Dutch, and they don't mind also learning English because that's a very common language on the internet. But maybe it depends on the parents. How strict are they? I'm not sure. I don't think I can answer that quite well.
Okay. Okay. So let's ask Tetsu another question.
Hello.
Hello. I wanted to ask you, do you think that there is a limit to how many languages children should learn or be exposed to?
It's a question I get often. Yes, it's very difficult to answer because the main focus should not be the number of languages, but why you are learning given languages, and also to what extent you want you want to aim for each language. Do you want a level that's do you want a native level? Do you want a level just to have fun while traveling, just to make a few friends? It all depends. Like for our family, we have 5 languages, and 4 of them are quite critical because of the family situation. But that's more an exception to than the norm. I think most people really want to second language or third language. This is really the limit I feel that most people want. Beyond that, it is more in the hobby area where they want a few more for fun. Like for us, it's Spanish. We added Spanish artificially, even though it's not relevant to our family per se. It's something that we think will be useful for their future. So that gets us to 5 languages, and it's pretty tough. It's pretty tough because we want all of them to be relatively high. But if that's not the case, then you can go deeper in just 2 or 3. And also, there's a big thing about the nature of each language you're learning. If they're relatively close, if you're learning, English and French or Spanish, it's relatively easier to take on than if you're doing English and Japanese or Mandarin. So for us, this is where we struggle. We have to really create a good environment so that the kids can learn it naturally without being burdened, but also allow us to go far in these languages. So there are academics who have come up with certain rules of thumb, like 20-30% exposure for each language. But again, I think this was based on some bilinguals with Hebrew and English or something, I think. But again, to me, it could be a little rule of thumb, but I think it really depends on the nature of the languages in this case. If it's Mandarin and Japanese, will it be as easy? I doubt it. You can give it a try. So that's my answer. I mean, I don't do 20 and expect all 20 to be perfect. That's not going to happen. And for us, the 5, we expect at least French and Japanese are going to be pretty strong, as I mentioned earlier. And we hope English, with all the types of input we have in Canada, I think it will be okay. Mandarin is struggling a little bit, especially this year because of COVID. Now my family's away from me, so I can't teach them Mandarin directly or talk to them in that directly, other than a few minutes every day with the messenger. But we always try to go and think of new ideas how to bring it up. Yes, because this year we're supposed to go to Taiwan. Now we can't. So they're in Japan until August, and they'll come back here. So during this time, what we do is we've hired another babysitter in Japan where they are right now at Nagasaki. We found a little Taiwanese girl who is very nice, and so we hired her to spend a few hours with them every day speaking Mandarin. I also got my oldest kid to only speak Mandarin with the younger ones, but that's tough. I mean, he tries, but again, I don't want to force it, but I just tell him as much as possible. I try to be resourceful with all these things and make the environment, you know, filled with languages. That's our approach.
Yeah, that's a very good point. And I wanted to ask you, do you have any specific tips about creating an environment, a good environment to learn languages for anyone who has kids who are being raised or will be raised multilingual? I understand, of course, that you said that, of course, you created it through your nanny, sort of the nanny, and but any other practical tips that you could give so that they create not only an environment but very good environment for them to learn?
Well, it's really about the lifestyle. How you, I call this context optimization. Your living context, whatever you do. I mean, many polyglots they talk about this, right? You ride the train for an hour to go to school every day, then you listen to whatever you listen to in the target language, that kind of stuff. It's about building the environment where it allows you to create a habit to use the languages constantly. So it's really the specific strategies. There's, you know, sky's the limit. There's many I can think about. You know, like one person, one language. Then you have parents. You have, you know, teachers, coaches. Like our kids, their skating coach. I try to find one who speaks English so that they can have that input. My daughter loves horseback riding, so we go out of our way to find one who speaks English, and then we tell them to speak, you know, exclusively English. TV, books, apps, you know, whatever. What's important is you don't force it upon your kids. You want to see what they are interested in, and then try to supplement that with the language element. That's really our approach. So each one of our kids have a different level of input depending on the activities that they take on. And then, like I mentioned earlier, you know, you have to adapt to the situation also. Like right now for us, it's the corona. We're really doing something that's different. And obviously it depends on your situation in terms of finances. You know, do you have money to hire a babysitter? You know, some of these schools, you know, immersion schools, they cost a lot of money. And also your conviction. If I ask some of our audiences, is not learning this language an option? You know, like how much do you want it? Do you want it so much that you're ready to mortgage your house for it? You know, or do you think it's just a time thing? Like I don't have to do it now. I'll do it later. The kids, they can learn it at school later. Things like that. It all affects your strategy. But I recommend go as early as possible so that you can build a good strategy soon and build a good habit soon. But it's not for everybody. There are certain upfront costs, like hiring an au pair costs, you know, thousands of dollars every year. That is something you have to think about. But I compare it to spending thousands and even more later in life at language school. Then I feel it's much cheaper to hire an au pair now with much better results. So that's kind of an investment way of thinking, right? But you know, like thank God I don't have to like borrow money right now from the bank to do this, but I would if it comes down to it, because for me, not learning it is not an option. But for some, it could be an option. It's like, I love a Porsche, you know, but I don't love it enough to pay $100,000 for it. So for me, it's an option not to buy it. You get the concept.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, very interesting. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Now I would like to ask Richard another question. Hello. I wanted to ask you, could you please give us a couple of do's and don'ts about how to approach language learning with children?
Yeah, so in my experience, as I said before, not naming the languages is really important. Another kind of do and don't, which as parents, it all sounds very theoretical as we're talking now about you just teach your kids languages and that's it. But unlike just language learning as adults, when you're dealing with your own relationship with your partner, your relationship with your partner and your child, your own relationship with your child, there's an awful lot that goes into it, and it's very much a three-dimensional world. So sometimes there can be, and I've noticed this amongst people who are raising children with different languages, if both partners don't speak all of the languages the child is learning, it can lead to small jealousies, feeling left out, feeling excluded, and there can be like sort of pressure points where you feel you have to conform and speak only the languages that are understood by both parties and the children. So that's the first thing that I think you need to be really in agreement from the very beginning as to what you're going to do, how you're going to do it, and how you feel about it, and to take that take all of that really quite seriously. So for us as a family, my wife understands Spanish, and now after years and years of me speaking French and German at home, she understands those too. But in the beginning, she didn't. And I was speaking in fluent, sort of normal standard German that I would use when I was au pairing in Germany with my daughter. But what I did was I'd take my daughter out of the house, and we'd have an hour of playtime in German every day. And I'd do the same thing for Spanish. And French I'd use at home anyway. But I would do concrete activities, play games with my daughter, because language has to be attached to action. So if you don't attach something to something meaningful in the child's world, the child's not going to learn the language. It's how we learn languages anyway, as children, even if we're monolingual or bilingual or multilingual, plurilingual, whatever you want to describe it as, you need to have that connection to something real. So I would take her out. We would play with different toys, different balls, different games, different animals, all the objects, and they would have their names in the language, and she would pick it up in a very normal way. I never once changed the way I speak normally. So for example, I wouldn't speak to her in a baby way. I would speak to her in a normal way. I would also use the language without worrying about the grammar. So I wouldn't not use a subjunctive, because obviously that's something you learn later in a language. With children, you don't need to worry about those things, because they'll know it's a subjunctive just because they've heard it and it's a pattern they've learned in the language. They don't know that they're using a subjunctive in that case. It's like they don't know, for example, certain types of grammatical structures that might be complex for a learner, but they're not for a child. So taking it as something that they need to learn as a tool, and not as kind of just random words that they need to learn, because you can teach a child random words, but if they're very, very small, if they don't have a context and they don't gel together and they can't use them and they see no benefit to using them, a very young child will often reject them after a while and say, that was a fun game, Daddy, but now let's get on with the communication, because I've got things going on in my head and I have needs and I need to express them. And a child will always go for the easiest route to express themselves. Children are not naturally going to just choose from day one to be multilingual, and they're not naturally going to choose to speak a language that for them may be more restrictive than another language. So they will always test the boundaries. They will always that they need to see it as fun. They need to see it as something positive. And that's another reason why the whole naming the language is just one psychological aspect of that whole game. I also give you one other recommendation before I let you talk to one of the other wonderful panelists you have on, and that is be a bit ruthless as a parent. Bribery is fine. It's fine to be totally mean with your kid and promise a present and things, because that's what I did. So I've had times with my daughter where I'll be like speaking German and she'll say, Dad, I don't understand what you're saying in German, just say it in English. And I say, in German, I would say, oh, what a shame, because I had a nice present for you. and then she go, oh yeah, Papa, ich verstehe. So don't be afraid of using kind of tricks as well, because kids will use tricks with you, use tricks with them too.
This is exactly my last question for this part for you. I wanted to ask you, do you have a practical suggestions about what kind of activity work best to keep children interested?
Mm-hmm. So different ages, different things. when they're newborns, they're babies. I mean, Tetsu will be going through this again now. So when they're newborns and they're babies, all I did was literally, I spoke through and described everything I was doing in all of the languages. So I'm just going to change your nappy. I'm going to lift up your legs. We've got to see if you've done a little poo-poo, those kinds of things.
I wish I had seen that.
Yeah, well, these kinds of things are the normal things that you talk about, right? They have to learn this thing. Are you hungry? What would you like? Do you want some apple? And I show the food and I show the different things. The toys, she had all different animals, like soft toys. And she knew all of the names of the toys before she could speak. So I would say to her in any one of the 5 languages, find the lion, and she'd pick out the lion. Find the giraffe, she'd pick out the giraffe. Find the dolphin, she picked up the dolphin. And she knew all of the animal names and the colors as well before she could do anything else. So we'd play that kind of game with her that was very practical, very visual, the language connected to her world. And that's the only way you can really do it. Unfortunately, with a baby, plonking them in front of a TV or a radio in a different language, it becomes white sound. They don't hear it. They don't understand it. They don't take it in unless it becomes interactive. So you can use TV if you sit with your child and say, oh, look what that person on TV is doing. Look what they're doing. What are they doing? Oh, where have they gone? What have they done? And you make it interactive. But just putting your child in front of Dora the Explorer, unless they're a little bit older, it's not going to have as much of an effect. And even when they get a little bit older, I'd say it's still way better to have the interaction, because then it's making it real. It's involving them in the world. It's involving their world into what's being said and what's being seen. And without that, unfortunately, children can't they don't understand why they're doing it. There's no point to it all.
Yeah, so true, so true. So I hope that later we will have the time to hear some more tricks, because I love them. I wish I could know more about it. Very, very nice. So now we'll ask Tetsu to come back on stage. I wanted to ask you, hi, Tetsu.
No, I just wanted to say that everything Richard say, I fully agree, and it really goes to show that we all have lots of different strategies. And we can do different things and still come up with results. And you have to find the strategies that fit your life context. So, good job, Richard.
Okay. And sorry, my question was:
yes.
Do you want to add any other activities, either for for older children, or any activity you would suggest which wasn't mentioned?
No, because for me conceptually, it's not about finding a language and fitting the activity to it, but it's the opposite. It's finding that activity that the kid loves. So I don't have a one-size-fits-all, fits-all strategy for anybody. It's always about knowing your kids well, knowing, and maintaining a good communication and relationship with your kids. If you can't have a good relationship with your kids, this is not going to work, regardless of how easy or how hard the languages per se are. It's really about communication, and like Richard said, putting your kids in front of a TV is a fantastic way to learn languages. There are scientific studies that say, oh, kids will not learn anything or whatever, and it depends on the situation. If you put a baby who's 1-year-old in front of a TV with nothing else, then no, he's not going to learn, because he's not going to understand what's happening. But you sit with the baby, as Richard say, and you say, oh, look at that pink elephant or whatever, and you interact with the baby, then it's a fantastic way to communicate, and you learn about the characters. You share something with your kids. That is the foundation of learning languages, which is about communication after all.
Yeah, thank you very much. Very soon we will start. You will start answering questions from people who are watching you, and so this is why I would like to ask Martin the last question, and then will be like questions according to the questions we received. Hello, Martin.
Hi.
Hi. I wanted to ask you. So. Do you have any advice? So you are someone who was raised multilingual. Do you have any advice you would like to give to parents who are raising multilingual children? Something that you think would be good, something that you don't think it would be good. I know it's a bit difficult. But from your perspective, any advice you would like to give?
Yeah, don't give up, because one of my languages, French, got a lot weaker because my father decided to strengthen my Dutch instead. And in hindsight, it might not have been the right move. It might have been, but I think it would have been better if he kept only speaking French to me, because he thought I would need the Dutch more. But I think the children easily adapt to their environments, and I also would have learned Dutch just in school. So don't give up.
Thank you. Very, very useful piece of advice. Yes. And before we pass to the questions, anything you would like to add about this topic in general? Something that you thought you wanted to say and I didn't ask you?
No, I was very delighted by the input I got from Tetsu and Richard.
Okay. Thank you very much. So I would like to have all the three speakers on stage so that we can start with the questions from... hello! Long time no see.
I miss you.
Oh, me too. So we received many questions. So I don't even know where to start. So I think that while you were not on stage, you also looked at the questions. If you really notice a question that you really wanted to answer, pick it before anyone else takes it. No, or I can just take the ones that I. So we have too many questions to answer all of them now.
Well, I saw one that just came up near the end that I get a lot. And that is, do you have some strategies to teach how to write languages? This is, nothing, this is not related to a lot of the stuff that we've been talking about earlier. So maybe I could hit this one because especially for us, like I have a lot of Japanese audience and they're always afraid, if they live outside of Japan, they're expat family, and then, do I have to send my kids to the Japanese school, weekend cram schools and whatnot. And I'm going to sound like a broken recorder, but it's always the same thing. It's what do you want out of this? So if I take our family as an example, we have Mandarin and Japanese, which are, which require extensive learning in terms of writing for these characters. But we don't force it. Again, we don't force it. We have apps, games that we put on their iPads. They spend some time, they go on it. And they earn points, they beat monsters and whatnot, and they've learned how to read and write just with that. And my wife would sometimes, print some exercise sheets and stuff. She'd leave it there, and she would spend time with them, teach them some. But if they don't want to do it, they don't do it. And now they're in Japan right now. Every summer they're in Japan for to go to the local school. Age standardized, normal school, and even this year, my oldest is in second grade. Second grade, you learn, they're learning stuff that I can't even write, because I work with Japan, so I can in Taiwan, so I can write these characters. I can write all the emails, and I've written articles and stuff, but on a computer. If I write it with my hand, I can write my name and maybe my address, but that's pretty much it. So my kids are now surpassing me in terms of the characters, and it's all by interest. Put books and stuff, and they'll learn how to read. I don't think they'll get very far with the writing, but at the same time, I'm not aiming for an extensive level, a very high level of written capacity in Chinese and Japanese. I mean, obviously, they're going to be educated in English and French, so their literacy in that is very important.
Thank you. It was very interesting. Thank you. Richard, any question, or Martin, any question you would like to answer?
Yeah, I found two specifically at me. So one of them is in Dutch. Ga je jouw eigen kinderen meerdere talen leren? Are you going to teach your own kids multiple languages? And I don't know yet. I think it depends a lot on with whom I'll be. I'll probably live in another country, so I think I'll try to keep teaching them Dutch.
Okay. Okay, very nice. I don't know whether I'm not sure about Richard. I don't know whether can you. It seems he seems frozen to me, but I don't know. Okay,
Oh.
okay. So maybe. Okay, so Tetsu, do
He's
you
gonna
have
start
any?
singing the Frozen song again.
Oh yeah, maybe. Tetsu, any other question you spotted?
Okay.
You would like to?
There are. I mean, there's a few popular questions that I see. For example, what is the language that you speak with your wife at home, and do you still follow Oppo with that? I mean, how can you? I mean, we speak. I'm in charge of Mandarin and she's in charge of Japanese. So by definition, we're gonna have to split up there. And I get this question a lot because people think, well, if the kids know that you speak other languages, then that breaks down the whole concept of Oppo, and that's not the point. When I talk about this, I always refer back to habit. It's not because they know you speak other languages that they're going to start resisting speaking your language or anything like that. That's not the point. It's when you start switching around, then you give them the option to do that, and that creates a potential for them to choose the path of least resistance. But if they've been born into an environment where they've only spoken Mandarin with you, then speaking another language with you is a weird thing. It's like I speak English with Elisa, all the time. It'll be weird for me to start speaking Spanish with you just because we both speak it. And when we actually do speak Spanish, we know it's a special thing. It's a special occasion. It's not something that we do all the time. But my habit is speaking English with Elisa, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's sort of what you want to create with the kids. So it's if you do Oppo, do it. Have one language that is the habit that you create with your kids, and you can speak different languages to other people. That is irrelevant. You can even read books in different languages with your kids, as long as your interaction is in Mandarin. You could, like for me, it's Mandarin. I would read them, stuff in Mandarin. If there's something that's strange, I'm reading in English, and then I go, oh, and what do you think about this? But in Mandarin. So that's our bonding language. And if I read in English, that's a special case. They know that.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah, very, very interesting. Yes. Thank you. Richard, do you have a favorite question you would like to answer?
Well, there's one that was directed at me. I can see a question here that was, do they mix up languages? And friends at school, and how do they hear one sentence in 5 languages? So generally speaking, my experience in this, that my daughter did have a mixing of some of the languages, and that, as I understand, is perfectly normal and natural. It's also, there are lots of normals when you're raising children with multiple languages. It can be normal for a child to say very little or nothing almost for the first 3 years, and then construct fluent sentences straight away from almost nowhere in all of the languages. It could be like my daughter. She started speaking before she was 1, and she was using 3 words in a sentence in all 3 languages at that age. And when we added in German and Spanish when she was 16 months old, I expected it to take a long time for her to get to a point where she'd use those languages actively. And in fact, within 2 months, she started preferring words in German and in Spanish over French, English, and Macedonian. One of the words was the word for flower, Blume. She preferred it in German for some reason. I don't know why. And she'd say it in the middle of a sentence. There was only one instance where my wife called me and she said, "Come quickly, I don't have a clue what your daughter is saying." she said a sentence in all 5 languages before all 5 words together, which I thought was hilarious, but also extremely adorable. And that's ridiculous. But honestly, as a problem, it's never been a problem. It's only been kind of funny stories like that. There were times where she didn't realize the languages. So we were living in the UK. She was around 2 years old, so she could already sort of communicate in English and Macedonian and French pretty well. And because she used to speak to me in Macedonian at that point, we went round to my mum's house, and my mum was speaking to me in English, and I was speaking to my mum in English. And she walked in the kitchen where we were talking, and she stopped me from answering translated what my mum said from English to Macedonian for me to understand what my mum was saying to me in English. And then, as they say, wait, Daddy, in Macedonian, she goes, check. And then she explained it in Macedonian. And then I still answered in English, but she kept doing it every time. My mum looked at me and said, what on earth is going on? Because my mum doesn't speak Macedonian. I said, she's just telling me what you said in Macedonian so that I can understand.
Yeah, I actually had a similar experience, apparently, I was told. When my mother spoke French, it apparently defied all the rules I had in my head, and I had to like stop her and like translate it to Hungarian, and I had the same thing. So it was very interesting.
This is a very it's a very popular question. Right? This is this code mixing. I mean, code. It's actually called. I mean, everybody calls it code switching, and I've always thought it was called code switching. And in all my lectures, I always say code switching. But I found out later, I actually made a video that I put on my YouTube channel. But it's actually called code switching if you do it intentionally. You know, if you're an adult. But if you're a baby, then it's actually called code mixing, which makes much more sense to me because they didn't know. They just have a few words and they just put that together and make a sentence. So it's code mixing and code switching. And if it's code switching, then we all do this. Polyglots, we all do this. It's not. Of course, it's no big deal.
Okay, so interesting. I wish we could continue forever. So I believe we don't have so much time left. So is there any way they could keep be in contact with you for the 1,000 of unanswered questions, or or I don't know whether it's
absolutely. I mean, nobody knows how to get a hold of Richard on this side. he's so obscure. But if you want to talk to me, I'm right here on Ask Tetsu. Everything, that's social media, YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, just find Ask Tetsu. And you can ask Tetsu.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. So a big thank you to our panelists, Richard, Tetsu, Martin. And thank you so much to all of you who are watching and who joined us tonight.
Thanks the organizers. Definitely.
Yeah.
Thank you guys for having us.
Yeah, thank you very much for having us. Thank you for putting this together, everyone at the team of the Polyglot Gathering.
Amazing.
Fantastic job. And I'm really impressed. And thank you to everyone who came to watch and to listen to us speaking. Really, really appreciate all of your great questions. And as Tetsu said, if you want to reach out, feel free. Tetsu or I'm Not Speaking Fluently on Instagram, on Twitter, YouTube, and on Facebook. And then there's a Polyglot conference as well. If you have any ideas for things that you'd like to see moving on from this after the gathering has taken place, and the things we can develop as ideas, I'm sure as Langfest organizers and Polyglot conference organizers, we're always happy to expand things throughout the year and then expand it further for the next Polyglot gathering.
Yeah, thank you, Martin. If you want to say a few words.
Yeah, of course. If anyone has questions for me, you can email me, I guess. That's the easiest thing, I think. Martin, my first name, .Lelarge, Lelarge, @gmail.com. And I want to say thanks to the organizers of the Polyglot Gathering to have made this happen. Anyway, and thanks for listening.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.